We're going to have an interesting mix of both virtual guests, myself, as well as our on-site panelists who take questions from the audience. This session's on the future of supply chain and looking at everything from first mile to last mile delivery and all of the disruptions that we're seeing throughout modern supply chains globally. We have a variety of topics that we'll be talking through. We're going to introduce all of our panelists here momentarily. Some of the topics include some of the critical shortages that we're seeing, price escalations, food and cold chain supply networks, those first and last mile delivery networks that we talked about, as well as academic partnerships and collaborations and public policy decisions. This session we hope to be engaging and interactive as it can be. It's kind of bizarre since it's like I'm talking to myself and Jeff, even though I know there may be upwards of 100 of you in the room. So with the other panelists, we hope to have some of that on site. Jeff and I will be doing questions as well. So with that, I'll do a quick self-introduction and then hand it off to our panelists. I'll let Jeff go next after myself, and then we'll go to the on-site panelists, so it's not too distant here. Again, my name is Dan Bumblauskas. I am the Hamilton ESP Fellow and an Associate Professor of Supply Chain Management at the University of Northern Iowa. I've worked in both academia and industry for many years and decades now, having worked for Asea Brown-Boveri, ABB, based in Zurich, Switzerland for many years, and then moving to the University of Missouri and University of Northern Iowa after that. I do a lot of different research in quality, maintenance, reliability management, with a heavy emphasis in industrial engineering and operations research, kind of at its core. Today, consulting, teaching, researching in all of these areas. So that's a little bit about me. Jeff, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself next and hand it over to our on-site?
Sure, thanks, Dan. And appreciate the opportunity to be here with everyone today, even virtually. My name is Jeff Weiss, and I co-chair Steptoe and Johnson's internationally ranked international trade policy and negotiations practice, and lead the firm's supply chain team here from Washington, D.C. I previously spent more than 15 years in a variety of roles in the U.S. government, legal roles, policy, diplomatic, trade negotiating years, and political roles as well across three administrations, including at the White House Office of Management and Budget, the Office of the United States Trade Representative, or USTR, and the Office of the Secretary of Commerce, where I serve as Deputy Policy Director. When I was working at Commerce, I was actually a senior advisor to the Secretary on important supply chain issues, and wound up working a lot with Nick Weiss and Gene Soroka and many folks out here on a variety of supply chain issues. And now at Steptoe, I counsel clients, companies, associations, and governments as well on issues arising under free trade agreements, the World Trade Organization agreements, and under U.S. trade law. And as lead of the Steptoe supply chain team, I also work with clients to craft and implement advocacy strategies to strengthen and build or rebuild U.S. supply chains and counsel companies looking to establish new or shift existing supply chains. And this can include all kinds of tools, including tariffs, tax credits, changes to procurement policy, climate measures, standards, and even construction in the government. All those things are in play in an era of supply chain disruption, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. So again, thanks for inviting me. Really look forward to this discussion.
Thanks, Jeff. Now I'll hand it over to our panelists. I'll let them go in whatever order makes sense there on stage.
Okay. Oh, Mike, sounds good. James Nissenberg, I'm head of logistics for Santa Monica Seafood. We are a mid-market processor and distributor of seafood and related products with extensive operations in the Southwest and Midwest. Our customers include restaurant groups, hotels, theme parks, hospitals, those types of casinos and country clubs on the food service side. And then we have many large grocery accounts as well as an e-commerce division that we started during the pandemic. As well as two restaurants you guys might know about in Santa Monica and Costa Mesa. On a typical busy day, we might do 1,400 deliveries at customers in 21 states.
Dustin Teves, joining you guys from GTAP, where I sit as VP of Strategy. My previous background comes into about 9 years of middle mile transportation over the road, working with Coyote and then through UPS. From there, went end-to-end supply chain solutions, so with a heavy emphasis on technology systems as a means of improvement. Then I spent 2.5 years in startup world, going from Series A to Series B with transportation technology firms, and working with them on how to build more intricate and communicative TMS systems while also understanding how the marketplace ideology plays into what we have in the transportation firms today.
Good afternoon. Craig Mygatt with Ceres Terminals. We're a portfolio company within the Macquarie Group, which is an Australian bank. They have an infrastructure fund. Last round was about $7 billion. They own terminals out here in LA and up in Seattle and in New York. And as Ceres, we have terminals throughout North America. My background is I spent 31 years with Maersk. So last job there was CEO of Sealand. And before that, I was on the infrastructure side as far as the intermodal side, working with the rail companies, the trucking companies, working all the boxes through the system. So I'm basically the hardware guy in this panel.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Manish Kapoor, excited to be here. I think the two big highlights I want to share is I've been fortunate to work for two large companies in our space, FedEx and Amazon. At Amazon, I helped launch home delivery worldwide. I was the first employee for Amazon Logistics. So those gray vans with the smileys that come to your home, you can blame me for that. In fact, the entire team that launched that is with us now, which is pretty exciting. We launched Amazon Fresh, grocery delivery, as well as Sunday delivery through postal injection. If you remember 8 years ago, we didn't get packages on Sundays. That's a normal expectation now. Prior to that, I was with FedEx for 7 years and launched same-day delivery for FedEx. But after 20 plus years in corporate, decided to walk away, got fed up of the red tape. More importantly, there's so much going on in our industry. Exciting time to be in the supply chain space. So last 4 years, we've been on a mission to help companies scale up e-commerce, mostly young companies, some large retailers. And as we've helped them grow, we grew as well. So we're amongst the fastest growing 500 companies in the US over the last 4 years. Went from initial 3 people to more than 500 globally now in the last 4 years. So excited to be here.
Excellent. Thank you, gentlemen, for your introductions. Now that I see the program stage, Jeff and I are kind of like Wizards of Oz up there. It's like interesting. And this is a modern world hybrid work and conferences and trade shows. So what we're going to do in terms of the format of the panel is we have a few prescribed comments that we're going to make, have each of the panelists speak for a short time about topics. And then we're going to open it up to questions and answer. And if on site there are any questions, please feel free to usurp control from me as the moderator and take those. I can't see everything that's going on in the room. Of course, I'm monitoring all of the Zoom universe here with our participants, chat window, Q&A, along with Jeff. So if there's anything, please stop and interrupt, take the questions. I cannot see the room, I can see the stage and us as Wizards of Oz. So our first topic today that we established as planned for this session as panelists was, and it was great getting to chat with this group times we did, but we talked a lot about insights on the future of supply chain networks and these critical shortages and price escalations. What perhaps is transient, what perhaps is here to stay. Craig, we're going to cue this up for you initially here to give your take on the situation we're facing. And then we're going to move over to Jeff after that with some insights, perhaps on the policy side.
Sure. Thanks, Danny. When you look at the current situation, I know everyone's been reading through it and probably know a lot about it already. And what it really boils down to, we work in the terminal business, so we see it firsthand, and you can look at our terminals every day. We get reports in on the labor side, what's happening, who's coming in, especially critical labor, such as crane operators, skilled labor on RTGs, the kind of heavy equipment that you use to move containers around the terminals. They're not coming in, and not only you have to work now 24/7, then you have to work all through the year. It's going to be more and more challenging as we move forward to get the labor on the terminals. And then not only that, but you have labor in every part of the supply chain, warehousing, and when you look at the trucking side of things, it's really difficult to get people to come in. And you look at these salaries and you say, you're kidding me, you guys won't come into work. You're making a ton of money. And they seem to have, there's different cultures within the different ports. We work in Savannah, we work in Houston and different areas, but they basically will work, they earn a lot of money, and then they'll take off until they spend it all, and then they go back to work when they need the money again. So it's a really, it's challenging to get people to come in and work. And on our side, on the terminal side, you're working 7 days a week. So in Houston, for instance, last couple of weeks, we had no labor Friday through Sunday. They just did not want to come in to work the ships, and the ships are sitting. There's a lot of, for Houston, it's much bigger out here, but there's a lot of ships sitting to be worked on the, sitting at anchor waiting. Savannah has 25 ships. Out here, you have 65 ships. You need labor to work through this. And if you do wave a magic wand and you say, okay, 24/7, that's going to do it. It's the same number of people working. You need more people to get on the ships, to get on the trucks, to get through the supply chain issues. A little bit controversial probably, but you have an immigration policy. You have all these people that want to come to the US and work, and you don't let people in. It's crazy that you don't let these people in. You could train them right on the border. They all want to come up. They're hard workers. You see them. I live down in Miami, so you see, it's incredible that we don't let these people into the country when we have so many jobs available and areas to work through, not only in our industry, but restaurants and flights and every other type of area, landscaping, all those jobs. It's difficult to get people in. So that's my 2 cents on the situation. I don't want to go too long because I know this is short.
So Jeff, do you have any insights on how the policy situation played into what Craig was just describing? If anyone wants me to show any of the slides here, just let me know which slide you'd like to show. Jeff, any comments?
Sorry, I was muted for a second. So I think that there can be a lot of developments from DC and from other capitals that could impact the supply chain design. There is a big policy push toward greater supply chain resilience and competitiveness as a result of what we're seeing now. I think we're going to see it in a couple of different directions. There are going to be policies pushing onshoring of critical industries, as well as reshoring, bring some or all of them back. Where that's not feasible, we're going to see a push for what people are calling nearshoring, or potentially friendshoring with trusted partners. In the U.S., putting together a lot of different supply chain dialogues with the EU, with Singapore, with others, and where possible, in certain cases, we're going to see de facto supply chain decoupling from certain countries. And there are multiple drivers of these policy trends. Clearly, COVID is one of them, with the shortages of retail goods and critical medical goods. This current unprecedented supply chain congestion, there are issues leading up to this that Craig was describing, whether it's the Texas storm, there's some Chinese terminals, pipeline, changes in consumer demand. All of those things are driving this trend. Shortages of semiconductors that are affecting multiple key industries, including autos and medical devices. The perception that the U.S. is falling behind when it comes to renewables such as solar, increased demand for high-capacity batteries, particularly for manufacturing electric vehicles, the climate crisis, of course, and then continued U.S.-China trade tensions. And I think we've seen, even with the new administration, what's going on, what's on in the last administration is going to be very difficult to find. There's going to be continued economic competition in key sectors such as steel, renewables, 5G, and then 6G, and worried about national security. And when I was in government working on these policies, we're essentially reactive on supply chain issues. It was an issue that did not command high level political attention unless there was a crisis, like a labor slowdown or a carrier bankruptcy. And as a cross-cutting issue, there was no single agency that was really in charge. We were just at the opening stages of trying to remedy that without a crisis to make big changes. Fast forward to today, it's an entirely different story. You have the president issuing an executive order right after coming to office, indicating that the administration is going to be proactive and develop a whole of government supply chain policy. You just had the president host a large group of CEOs on supply chain, particularly focused on Southern California, to try to get movement accelerated in advance of the holiday season. And then the key sectors that the administration cited potentially impacts the entire economy. In addition to some of the sectors I mentioned, there's also critical minerals, and transportation, public health, even food and agriculture, and chemicals impacts all of those sectors. So essentially what you're going to see is policy changes that will incentivize or disincentivize certain types of supply chain design in several areas that I want to briefly highlight, because as companies, I think these are things you need to be aware of and be able to take advantage of. One is clearly going to be sustainability. And sustainability is being defined very broadly these days by the US and other governments. It's not just going to cover carbon footprint and circular economy, but they're also looking to cover anti-corruption and measures against modern slavery. And these are important topics from a policy perspective, but they also have a secondary effect of reversing the offshoring of jobs. Since the U.S. and other developed countries have an advantage in this area, it can have a higher regulatory bar. So we're seeing that regulations. So Germany just passed a supply chain due diligence law. The EU is working on a supply chain diligence law that Germany is trying to push in that direction. That will apply supply chain wide extraterritorially outside the EU. We're also going to be procurement preferences and requirements. We can already see in some cases for sustainable electronic goods, federal acquisition regulations. And we're seeing that in the solar space as well. And we are helping companies now to put standards that they can use to gain an advantage in that space. And climate in particular is going to be big in terms of supply chain design. The European Union is going to be imposing tariffs on steel and aluminum and cement to offset their domestic emissions trading scheme. This is likely to be copied by others. It's unclear what carbon measures will be adopted in the U.S. It's a very fluid situation at the moment, but it's a very high priority for the administration. It could eventually cover life cycle emissions, which will incentivize shorter supply chains. And right now, we're helping companies do scenario planning, looking at the different climate measures going up around the world. And the last thing I just want to mention is decoupling. I think that the tariffs, tit-for-tat tariffs between China and the U.S. are going to be very difficult to unwind. You're going to see continued tighter administration of export controls, of investment restrictions, of other restrictions on enterprise cybersecurity requirements for procurement and the energy grid and telecommunications supply chains. You're going to see funding proposals in some of the bills that are being considered on Capitol Hill, stricter procurement rules in general, and friendshoring agreements in high priority sectors. And we're already helping to position companies to take advantage of that trend as they see likely large sums of funding coming from the bills being debated on the Hill, which should be implemented by the middle of next year. And so these are all factors that companies, especially in critical sectors, need to take into account as they design their supply chains and potentially shift them to make them more resilient in a world of supply chain disruption.
Excellent. Thanks for the comments, Jeff. Just one housekeeping note, and then I've got a question that came in here, and then we'll see if there's any questions initially in the room there. If anyone on the tech side, I don't know if we can adjust the pins. There's been some comments about the pinning. the screen versus PowerPoint versus speakers. That may mess with some of the on-site camera angles used. So I understand it can't, but for those that are watching online, unfortunately, we can't adjust that on our side of this, the panelists, moderators. One question that came in, I'll leave it up to any of the panelists to kind of jump in on this one. What is a realistic timeline to see significant change in coupling and nearshoring? So what do we think the timeline is like in this respect?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah. What is a realistic timeline to see significant change in coupling or nearshoring? I'm going to paraphrase, reshoring, moving some of this supply base back to local suppliers or buy suppliers.
So I think the realistic timeline isn't going to be any time in the next 6 months, but the conversations will start happening today into the next 6 months. As you watch, procurement cycles have to diversify because suppliers are changing what their output capacity is. Vendors are changing who they're willing to work with, and transportation providers alone are trying to figure out what's the most consistent revenue stream. It's important that we start having the conversation in real time, and then we actually put together the infrastructure into some of those networks where nearshoring is an available opportunity. I can't give you a hard data piece because I think what hasn't been done effectively yet today is sourcing alternative opportunities away from the Asian Pacific trade area.
I just jump in. You have to be somewhat commodity specific here because we're never going to get apparel or footwear or items like that back in the US. It's just not going to happen. So when you get more specific about which auto or what segments will come back to the US, I think then you get a little more granular as to when that could happen.
Yeah, and to build on that, it's creating an infrastructure system that's available for folks to go out there and source that based off what their needs are.
Yeah. And that's a cost factor against that as well.
Exactly. So, collaboration across many industries will be required for that. And fortunately enough, as we continuously build better technology in the area, we'll have more and more data points and available, call it sourcing opportunities for those moves. And then hopefully, as we start building that out more and more, we have some success rates, and then the understanding of cost at a unit economic level becomes easier for folks to forecast and foresee. But again, that starts today, and a lot of folks in the room that are coming through these programs, it's important that you start thinking about these things because it has to change, and I think this year is highlighting the need for decoupling and diversification.
To expand, it's not just nearshoring US or Canada. When you look at the geography, Mexico is a big part of it. And you can even go down into Central America. There's some opportunities through that whole area where you can truck from a lot of locations, even Guatemala you can truck up from. So there's some opportunities just beyond the US border.
Yeah, I was going to mention the same that we've already seen the transition. So it's not even 6 months. Some of it is already happening. And shift towards Mexico, even Latin America that we're observing away from China and Asia in general.
That was great. I was worried we were going to get into a little bit of debate amongst panelists, but it seemed like that worked out very well there. Well done, gentlemen. Do we have any questions in the room before we move on to our next topic that we will talk about, which is food and cold chain analysis?
Right here. Do we have a microphone? Or right in the middle? Yeah. Okay.
Hey guys, I appreciate you all coming out to sit on the panel. I just have a couple quick questions. One, given the fact we've got 60, 70 ships parked offshore, what have we actually learned from this disruption that's taking place right now?
That the supply chain is not very resilient. I mean, when you look at the actual data, the number of containers that have to move through the system, and what we have as far as, I go back to the labor point, but the ability to move those containers, it doesn't add up. So when you do the math, there's just no way it was going to work. So there needs to be, I'm just surprised people haven't diversified right when it started happening, that they still try to push through LA. I know when you go up to Vancouver or up to northern ports, it stops pretty quickly. You don't have to put too many ships in there, but still, there's so many ports to choose from and to work through that you could diversify your supply chain and to have 60. I think the BCOs, the end users, the ones with the product, I'm just shocked that they have these 65 ships of containers sitting outside of LA. It's been that long that you would think that people would have reacted by now, but when you see the money starting to roll towards services, we're big in the cruise business. People are spending money differently now. It's not all goods, so maybe that will start thinning things out a bit. But I mean, it's just amazing that you're not diversifying. If you're
I can add a little bit to it. I think what we've seen is obviously a major shift in things used to be steady. COVID happened. Suddenly, everything stopped. And now everything is coming back at high speed. So the way to explain this is the variability went extreme high and low in a very short period of time. So the variability in the demand changed so rapidly that the capacity could not keep up with it. And that exposed bottlenecks across the board. So what we are facing now is bottlenecks across the supply chain, and just we were not prepared to handle it. And I think, obviously it's painful to get through it right now, but the opportunity here is this is going to force our industry to innovate and invent and make sure this were to happen again, we're better prepared for it. To your point, looking at multiple ports, the discussion about offshoring, nearshoring, these are some permanent changes that most businesses will make and be better prepared for next time.
In terms of the discussion about nearshoring, how much of the supply chain, kind of on a percentage basis, do you expect to kind of move out of APAC and come, closer to the U.S.?
Very minimal. There's just no capability to do what China does. I mean, they produce so much product, and for the costs that they have today, it's going to be very difficult to justify bringing things back to. You can try Mexico, but a lot of people have tried Mexico. It's difficult. It's not as straightforward as just moving a factory from A to B. There's a lot of expertise and capabilities in China that you just can't replicate in North America. So I'd say less than 5. It's got to be a small number. Look what Vietnam tried to do. They tried to pull some out of, when you look at the size of China and the production that China has, and then you look at Vietnam, when you put the circles together, you can hardly see Vietnam, and that's a major producer of product. It's that big.
I think it depends on the sector, because I've seen companies looking to move out of China.
All right, Daniel, back to you.
They're looking at India, Turkey, Eastern Europe, so that they are looking at other areas, but it's very sector specific.
As we can't hear you, I think we can hear each other.
Can you guys hear me right now?
Seems like Jeff and I have lost our audio. Can you hear us now? Okay, so Jeff, if you want to rehash what you just said about sector and geography, right there, I think we were cut out for a second.
Sure, I was just saying that we are having clients come to us that are looking to move out of China. And this really depends on the sector, of course. But they're looking at India, they're looking at Turkey, they're looking at countries in Eastern Europe. Again, this is more long term because they're looking at your set up new facilities or work with new suppliers. But they're clear that they got the message from the administration that for a variety of reasons, they probably need to move. And so they are actively looking to do that where they can. And we're looking at various options, whether it's reliability or climate liability, and also on the security side. So we are seeing some movement, but I agree with you that there aren't a lot of options right close to the U.S. Mexico is a huge opportunity. But with the AMLO government, I think they're sending us that it's going to be a difficult investment climate there. You could be taking more advantage than they are. So I think that's a missed opportunity for them.
All right, we had another question come in that is very closely related to this about strategic manufacturing being out of China. And I think we've talked about this a little bit, seeing some of the infrastructure growth in Thailand, Vietnam. I've personally had challenges and been involved in projects that were challenging some of that strategic manufacturing to Mexico. And so I think you'll find that as companies look at doing business, they're looking at where's the raw material base, where's the customer base, and what makes the most sense for us right now in terms of manufacturing investment during the pandemic and post-pandemic. And there's a lot of variables to that, and I think you can push towards diversifying that across multiple countries. Right now, I know in terms of traveling in and out of countries, you have to have certain vaccines or boosters or certain things like this, where if your trading partners require similar requirements for coming in and out, quarantines, those types of things. I think that's one of the things that we'll see coming down the pipeline further as travel continues to reopen. Is do I really want to not go to country X because they require a vaccine my country will allow, or a booster program my country will allow? Now suddenly I have a manufacturing base country Z where I can do that and move back and forth. For us, I'm already seeing that with certain parts of, say, Central and Latin America, where the travel to America, those countries is more open than others, perhaps. That's just a total example. But I think you'll see strategic manufacturing diversified around the world, I guess, is my take on that. Gentlemen, are there any more questions in the room, or does someone want to add something to that?
No more questions.
If there's no more questions in the room, our next topic that we want to talk a little bit about, James, if you want to take this one, was insight on food and cold chain networks and what's going on in that space.
Sure. So I can give a couple insights just during the pandemic, way things affected Santa Monica seafood, as well as some things that sort of happened in the grocery industry. We had some of the same challenges everyone else has had and continues to have sourcing products, in terms of supply chains and factories and being shut down temporarily or going to reduced hours because workers had COVID, or there was restrictions on getting things in and out of the country. As you know, passenger airline travel sort of came to a halt, and a lot of our product goes in the bellies of passenger aircraft. So there was sort of fewer ways to get product to LA. Ironically, the backup at the ports doesn't typically affect us directly because most of what we do is fresh product. It's flown into LAX from around the world, or it's trucked in here from places like the Pacific Northwest. Sometimes some of our frozen product comes on a refrigerated ocean container, but it's not that much. But indirectly, we're all affected by what's going on with the supply shortages right now and sort of the variability and all that. So that's on the supply chain, sort of how things affected us. Another thing I want to mention is, there was a tremendous reduction in food service business, restaurants, hotels, that type of thing during the pandemic. Most of that's come back now, which is great. But there was definitely supply challenges on the food side, where manufacturers, they might have served both food service accounts and grocery accounts, but now everything was basically going to grocery. And the way their assembly lines were set up and their packaging and their labor and their design, it was all, set up for food service. They had to figure out how to box things differently and, run lines differently to get it for groceries. So that caused, a lot of hassle last year as well. I think that's going back now too. I think that stabilized quite a bit, but that was something that definitely happened during the pandemic.
So if I can add, so we've seen food as the largest growing segment, and I think it touches everyone here because now we're getting food delivered at home, which didn't used to happen before. So while we're talking about all the disruption that's happening, that's leading to transformation for supply chain, I think what's happening in the last mile, final mile, it's a significantly rapid change. I'll share a couple of examples. We have one customer that was delivering food to corporate kitchens, large number of customer base, and guess what? COVID hit, nobody's going to work. So their volume got wiped out overnight. And we flew in, we brainstormed saying, how do we solve the situation? So instead of taking food for 200 people to one kitchen, we decided to create 200 snack from home boxes. and we got the list of all the employees for their customer. And we actually started to deliver the same snacks and food to homes, start to finish in 2 weeks. We didn't have a whole lot of time to launch this and roll it out in a month nationwide. So that was one situation. But when you think about companies that are delivering within 30 minutes, food products, that's the other extreme. Their business is skyrocketed. And it's beyond what they can manage right now. So you've seen a lot of new companies pop up. GoPuff is one of them that I think they've got $2.5 billion in funding so far. They bought Bevmo. For those who go to those stores in the California area, GoPuff owns that. And then on the East Coast, you may hear about JOKR, Reef Technologies, that is actually using parking lots and turn the parking lots into dark kitchens. And so you may be buying food from your favorite kitchens, but I can tell you that it's not, don't be sure that the food is actually being made at the restaurant that you ordered the food from. It could be coming from somewhere else. So high-speed disruption in the food supply chain, especially in the last mile piece of it. And because this is such rapid delivery within less than 30 minutes, for the most part, chill chain goes out of the window. You don't need that because it's so fast delivery. So we'll continue to see big transformation as far as food supply chain is concerned, but primarily a lot of change in the last mile home delivery side.
I also wanted
And
to
unless there's a question, that's actually our next topic. So I didn't mean to cut anyone off. Chime in, but the last mile delivery was our next topic. I don't know who wants to take that one first. If anyone wants to chime in on that.
I just had one more point on the food side.
Yeah,
I wanted to mention something interesting that's happening in the grocery business, which is with all the e-commerce and people, starting to order home deliveries or not going to the grocery store anymore. There's all these different models that the grocery companies are working out, and no one's really settled. Sort of the winning model hasn't been settled, in my opinion. You've got, groceries that are still picking from store, either their employees or an Instacart, that type of thing. You've got some that are trying sort of these micro centers where they're kind of building on next door and putting certain SKUs there to be picked so that they don't sort of disrupt store operations. And then you've got companies like Kroger that are trying, their own dedicated distribution centers just for e-commerce. So it's really interesting what's sort of playing out there. Same thing on the delivery side. Some of them are, crowdsourcing deliveries. Some of them are still using their own, drivers and delivery vehicles and having being more able to control the message and the customer experience. So it's very interesting what's going on there, and I don't think it's been settled yet, and I think it's something to watch.
I don't know who has college-age kids, but after my son ordered the third time from GoPuff, I had never heard of them. I said, there's got to be something. What is going on here? I had to call him out and say, what is this? But it was legit. It was food.
Trying to multitask and answer some of the questions that are coming in here in the chat with us. So, one of the ones I was answering that I think aligns well with our kind of segue into the last mile delivery was specifically about technologies replacing or helping with this worker shortage. And I used the example of what we've seen in Germany and Japan as of late, or in recent years, as well as one of the deterrents to this disruption being pushback from other, we'll call it maybe lobbying or agencies like that. Jeff, maybe I'd appreciate your take on this. So, for example, autonomous trucking was brought up in the chat window. And when it comes to autonomous trucking, one of the things I've been hearing recently is that industries like rail and barge are pushing back against autonomous trucking, and they're concerned with it because it displaces some of their business. Any thoughts on technology and policy, and we'll call it kind of lobbying and pressuring, and how that may shape up?
Well, everything right now is really held up with the infrastructure bill and then the reconciliation bill. And so it's a very fluid situation. I think most everyone is following that at least today in terms of which way it's going to go. I think that there's clearly a lot of potential funding available. There's also a technology bill that passed the Senate earlier in the year to provide funding for some of the technologies you mentioned. But it's very unclear I would also note that with the supply chain congestion we're seeing in Southern California, that there are issues with respect to data sharing and pressures that are not allowing that data sharing to occur to maximize efficiency. And so I'm not surprised to hear that there are some battles between various segments of the supply chain with respect to fund one particular area of the supply chain over another. And I think the administration is going to have to take a holistic approach and prioritize particular modes, gateways that are going to provide the best for the pocket in terms of supply efficiency and resilience.
I would just add to that, I mean, everyone needs to collaborate together. When you look at some of the East Coast ports, they've been able to build out inland rail depots 240, 250 miles away from the ports. So they're taking trucks off the road and they're staging containers inland where it's much easier for truckers to come in and out, get ability to get chassis. I mean, the very basics, fundamentals versus going to a port, which can be a big challenge for all the people in the supply chain, all the different between the chassis operators staging in certain areas, the truckers being in certain areas, the rail companies being. If you can just get it out, and here you go out to Hobart, I mean, it's getting 20 miles out for LA. That's pretty good for BNSF. But you can even go further out. I'm sure they can look at going out to 200 miles and staging any transload capability that goes in that they know is not going to stay local or domestic. Maybe they mix boxes, so they can't do that with everything, but you can do it for a certain portion of your cargo. Get it out of LA. So I was going up for the port yesterday, and we were going like 5 miles per hour. These truckers are getting tortured getting out of the port. So if there's another way to get boxes out and working with the rail lines together and the chassis companies collaborating, I think there's a lot of potential to take trucks off the road and help everybody out.
So we've taken a variety of questions, both in typing answers, responding to them from the online audience. Are there any questions in the room there? Can you guys see my screen where I shared some of kind of ship congestion of the map in the room? I did share that one of the slides that Craig, I believe, put together for the panel here, showing some of that congestion that's going on. Just as I've seen multiple different kind of views of this, and maybe many of you have as well.
And so this is, I think everyone's seen a picture of this congestion and the number of ships in LA. But it's not only Los Angeles and Long Beach that are getting hit with this. And when you look at percentage of freight moving through a gateway, it's pretty relative to Savannah being in the same situation. You have maybe 14, 15 ports working through the cargo. Savannah, you have one port, one terminal that's pushing all the cargo through it, and they have 25 ships. So when you look at it on a percentage basis, it's just as bad a situation on the East Coast and some areas as it is on the West Coast. And once you, as a shipping company, once you start backlogging like this, it impacts your entire, well, if you have a string of ships, 12 ships, and you have ships sitting like this at anchor, and the charter rates today that are $50,000, $60,000 a day for the shipping lines, and fuel costs, which are starting to escalate, and especially the low sulfur, it's going to get, I know they're posting huge profits right now, but the costs are going to start really incrementing quickly here on the shipping lines. It's not only here in the US, it's in Europe, and then you start slowing down your ships because you don't want to be at port too early. So the real backlog and the number of vessels that are sitting is actually artificial. There's ships coming across the ocean right now at 8 to 10 knots. Usually they'd go 15, 16, so they'd get there quicker, but they have no reason to be there quicker. So that's more capacity taken out of the equation because they're slow steaming to that extent. And they're now bypassing the UK. So Britain is really struggling to get container ships in there because nobody wants to risk their strings into the continent there. So you look at the overall number of ships that are either slow steaming or sitting in ports, and the percentages are a lot higher than what's being advertised as far as the number of how big of their fleet is being laid up.
So along these same lines, we have a crystal ball question. How long do you think congestion will last and will it normalize when? Kind of like our other question about best guess here.
This will take a long time to clear out, and it's going to take the consumers to really change it. So it depends on what people start spending their money on. And I'm not going to go out and buy a refrigerator right now because it's going to take 2 years to get a refrigerator. And people are going to start looking at if you want a couch or something like that. You're just going to wait because it's not going to come anytime soon. So, and then people are going out to restaurants now. They're going traveling. So I think the money spent is going to change just because people are frustrated about waiting for goods to get on shelves.
So we do have one other topic here that we haven't addressed yet, which is what we call kind of industry academic partnerships, collaborations, part of what the USC Global Supply Chain Center and some of the initiatives we've done in healthcare, food, have presented over the years. Manish, did you want to talk a little bit about kind of what some of your partnerships with USC, other academic, those types of things?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been fortunate to work with USC closely in the supply chain program, and we work with other universities as well. There's a reason why this program is number one. Just the quality of the program and the students coming out, it's been phenomenal. So over the last couple of years, we've hired a number of interns that eventually joined our teams full-time, and some even globally went back to their home countries, and they're still working for us. Part of the reason we're here, our team is here, is to, I think it's going to be a competition to pick the best of the best here. So that's one of our focus. And I think this is for us as an organization, it's also part of how we want to give back to our industry, is to help the next generations go through the right training and education that's required, but also get the practical exposure as well as the career path that they're looking for. So we expect we'll continue to work closely with the program at USC.
And if people are interested in discussing further some of the partnerships, whether it's on research, applied practice side, or the student pipeline for talent, speaking of, you can follow up with myself or Nick Weiss on some of the things that are going on there. It's definitely a war for talent right now for students. I know even my supply chain program at the University of Northern Iowa, students generally have positions locked up very early in their graduate studies. We have a large infrastructure of manufacturing with companies like John Deere, Collins Aerospace, Pella Window and Door, Han H&I, and they're all battling to hire students with skill sets in operations, supply chain management. And that's true at USC and many of our partner schools and things of that nature.
Yeah, one thing I want to also add is that the last couple of years, we've done a number of class projects as well, gotten involved with that. One specific one I want to share is that we did a research project on customer returns, e-commerce returns, which we all know is still an untapped market. For us, nobody's fully solved it. Even Amazon hasn't completely solved it. If you want to return something, you have to get in the car, go drop it off somewhere still. So we had 3 teams that work on it, came up with lots of ideas. And as a result, many months later, we launched a scheduled pickup from home for one of our customers, Rent the Runway, where customers can actually pick the day and time online and on the app, and the driver shows up for their convenience to do that. The other thing that came out of that the students helped us was think through how smart lockers can be used for returns as well. And that team had really pushed us to say, hey, let's bring one locker at the USC campus. It didn't happen back then, but it happened now. For those who are in the room, welcome you to go see the locker that we have outside, which is designed exactly for that. Again, students, the class had a big role in that, helping us get to this point. So, that's another area that we heavily
Dustin, I have a question for you that came in, and then it's between the other. We have two new questions here. And so, Dustin, do you think that the U.S. offers some unique strengths in the global supply chain, and what can companies in the U.S. try to lean into in terms of their talents? I know you had some entrepreneurial startup sort of background on the panel here.
So the U.S. has a really good opportunities. Number one, we have a very large economy with a ton of exposure at the individual's level. Everyone here has equal access to education systems all the way up to the collegiate level. So our exposure to what is currently in motion, what products are in the field, and then just the media sells to us directly allows us to understand where things are going faster than some kids in other countries that don't have that direct access. What we also have is, outside of just scale, we have a huge infrastructure here that serves populations across a very large landmass. Just be very one-to-one, like an easy comparison is Canada has 97% of their population across 4 small geos, where the US has, was it 200 million roughly? Yeah, 340 million across a very large landmass. So opportunity is going to be continuously needed here in the US. As a student coming up through supply chain programs, your ability to understand that as the population continuously diversifies, whether it be urban centers, suburbs, or even moving more rural, which we saw some changes last year, the supply chain will always be evolving, and there's always going to be jobs here. So your ability to access equal education today, and then your desire to be a part of that is going to afford you a lot more opportunities in the startup sector, because there constantly has to be new technologies and new implementations that serve this community that's continuously moving around such a large landmass. So I've always seen in the startup world, whether it be singular ideas that are trying to spread or very complex ideas that are trying to, call it, bridge the gap between other systems, the US offers significant opportunity in both. We just have such a unique landmass and population density, or call it diversity, that allows us to constantly have to evolve where our supply chains are going to be. And right now, it's something, I believe it's 60-ish% or so are concentrated in some of the 10 major metro cities, but that leaves 40% of the consumer base that no one's catering to yet. So continuously thought I'd bring in new implementations and ideas to serve that other population will always be in demand. And for young folks that are entering the space, to start thinking about that is where the next frontier will be. And I think we see that with drones and autonomous vehicles, where we don't have the labor staff today to reach those populations.
Any in-room questions? We have a couple more here. Questions. I'll give you a minute.
Nothing here right now.
All right. So James, I have one for you.
Great.
How has the food supply chain situation contributed towards price increases, and what can we do to plan and work around that?
Wow. Yes, as everyone knows, there's inflation in most segments of the economy right now. Food is certainly no different. The price that we pay for product has gone way up. The price that we charge for product has had to go up, so that people can continue making, some level of profit and continue to be in business. When that might end, I couldn't tell you. It's sort of a reality right now. Yeah, I'm not sure what else to add to that.
I can add one more part to it. So last year during COVID, what was happening was, for transferring food, you need dry ice. So as you're shipping seafood, obviously dry ice goes in the box for the most cases. Well, dry ice was in really low availability. It was completely wiped out. And the cost of dry ice alone went 4 times just in a short period of time. So that forced a lot of innovation in terms of packaging and other ways to keep the food good, even for long distances. In some cases, we started using commercial airlines to fly food faster as well versus trucking it. So I think we'll continue to see the situation force more innovation and new ways of solving the issues that we're running into overall.
Excellent. We only have a few minutes left, and there's a question here that I think will be a good way to kind of wrap up some thoughts. So this question is, and I'm paraphrasing this a little bit, but what's one thing we can do as supply chain executives that would make our lives easier? So one thing that pops into our head that would make our lives easier. James, do you want to take that, and then we kind of work our way across the line here?
Wow, I mean, where to start? I think, trying to resolve the backlog at the ports, I think, is the biggest thing right now. I think that's causing a ton of price inflation and product shortages. The challenge is there's so many multiple sort of operational things that are happening simultaneously. In addition to consumer demand being extra high, people who've been working have tons of cash that were left over from the pandemic. They didn't go on vacation. They're putting money in their houses. And so there's a lot of sort of spaghetti and also a lot of actors with conflicting interests as usual, but even worse now. So whoever can really tackle that and make it work, I think, they definitely get a gold star.
I think just transparency and collaboration, things amongst companies, and then those stakeholders from each between customer bases, consumers, and the service providers in between. It's a competitive environment. We all understand that, but to act with a little more collaboration and transparency of what you're intending to accomplish is going to go far for a very complex challenge right now.
Good. An enthusiastic workforce. That's what we people that want to work.
Yeah, I'd say as leaders, we gotta lead the change, be okay with the change. Status quo is not going to work, given everything that's going on. It's interesting, we often talk about the push supply chain and pull supply chain. It feels like push and pull are against each other right now. They're clashing. So we talked about ocean freight coming from China and the seaports being clogged up. That's all pushing the product into the US. We also talked about the 30-minute delivery, which the consumers are pulling the product in. And I think there's a lot of disruption going on there. So as industry leaders, we got to lead the charge of driving the change that is required to adapt with what's going on right now.
Excellent. Jeff, anything to add before they might pull the plug on us? I think we're out of time. Anything to add, Jeff?
Yeah, I would say to make your life easier, be proactive. We know that future policy shifts are going to be happening. They're going to make things difficult, but get ahead of them. Look at your supply chains across your enterprise, reducing your inputs, where you're located, sourcing from, where you're shipping to, especially if you're in an area of high priority for the administration or for other jurisdictions. And go out and make the changes that you need to make. And don't be afraid to advocate for things that you need. You need a rail line, you need funds to build a plant, you need procurement preference to create a market. All of these things are now potentially in play. So it's going to be easy in the long term if you're proactive.
Excellent. And now I will wrap up the panel by building
We have
off
one
a
more
little bit of-
question. We have one more question here.
Sure, go ahead, take that.
Yeah, just quick question for you about the, we've had a lot of discussions around the ports being backed up, but how do we address the bottlenecks that will come downstream whenever everything gets cleared up at the port? I'm talking about truck drivers, the labor market at the fulfillment centers, distribution centers, and then flowing all the way down to the last mile. I can just see that, obviously right now all the focus is at the ports, but this problem is just going to get pushed down the supply chain. So what are we doing to proactively address that? What we've seen on our side is lots of our clients are coming to us asking for us to help them with recruiting. And it's just like a brute force thing, but it's not necessarily the most strategic way to go about addressing the long-term challenges.
I think it works the other way around. It starts at the warehouse. It's showing the ships at the port, but it starts at the that people can't push the product through the warehouses, so they keep the containers on the ports. Ships can't come in because there's too many containers on the ports. So it's labor. Again, I've been saying it the whole time, and I really feel the immigration policy needs to change. We need to bring people in that are enthusiastically, they want to work, and we can train them, right? If the government wants to put a lot of money into the situation, put it into training at the border. Get people their CDL licenses, get them whatever kind of training they need so that they can sustain a family and sustain themselves and be a positive force within the communities.